You spent decades raising your children, loving them, teaching them, putting their needs ahead of your own. You were the one they turned to when they needed comfort, guidance, or support. But lately, something's shifted. Maybe they no longer ask for your opinion. Maybe they interrupt you, talk over you, or seem irritated by your presence. Or maybe they've stopped showing appreciation altogether, and when they do speak to you, it feels like you're just another obligation on their to-do list. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many parents, especially as they get older, find themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. The respect they once had from their children seems to be fading, and that realization can be heartbreaking. It's easy to feel frustrated, disappointed, even angry. You might be tempted to remind them of all the sacrifices you've made, the years you gave, the love you poured into every part of their lives. But here's the difficult truth. Getting angry rarely works, and often it pushes them even farther away. So what does work? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. In this video, we'll walk through 6 powerful shifts, simple but life-changing actions you can take to help reclaim your dignity, rebuild your confidence, and regain your children's respect. These are not harsh ultimatums or guilt trips. They're quiet, dignified adjustments in how you carry yourself, how you communicate, and how you define your role in their lives moving forward. Some of these insights may surprise you. Others may feel like a gentle reminder of the strength you already have. But if you stay with me until the end, I promise you'll walk away not only with hope, but with a new sense of power, clarity, and peace. Let's begin. 1. Stop chasing their approval. One of the most common and painful mistakes many parents make as they grow older is trying too hard to win their children's approval. You may not even realize you're doing it. Maybe you always say yes, even when you'd rather say no. You rearrange your schedule to fit theirs. You avoid sharing your true feelings because you're afraid of upsetting them. Deep down, you might be hoping that if you just keep giving, keep accommodating, keep being the good parent, they'll finally see you, appreciate you, and treat you with the respect you deserve. But here's the hard truth. The more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. You see, respect isn't earned through self-sacrifice, it's earned through self-respect. When you constantly put yourself second, you unintentionally send the message that your time, your opinions, and your feelings don't matter, not as much as theirs do. And once that belief settles in, it becomes easier and easier for them to take you for granted. I once knew a woman named Margaret. In her younger years, she was confident, outspoken, and independent, a real force of nature. But as she got older, she started silencing herself around her grown children. She let them make all the decisions, even when she disagreed. She changed her plans to suit theirs, avoided conflict, and tolerated their dismissive tone, all in the name of keeping the family together. She thought that by always being agreeable, she was doing the right thing. But over time, something shifted. Her children didn't value her more, they valued her less. They started seeing her not as a respected matriarch, but as someone who would always give in, always adjust, always stay quiet. She wasn't keeping peace, she was losing her voice. If you've found yourself in a similar place, the answer isn't to demand respect, it's to stop acting like you need it. Start setting boundaries. Speak your mind, even if it's uncomfortable. Say no when you mean no. Value your time. Stand up for your feelings. You don't have to be rude, harsh, or cold, just firm, clear, and true to yourself. The moment you begin showing your children that you respect yourself, that your life, your choices, and your voice matter, they will start seeing you differently. Maybe not overnight, maybe not all at once, but little by little that shift will happen. And in time, that lost respect will begin to return, not because you chased after it, but because you modeled it. You deserve to be seen, you deserve to be heard. And above all, you deserve to be respected, starting with yourself. 2. Don't argue, lead by example. When your children speak to you with disrespect, when they interrupt, ignore, or brush off your thoughts, your first instinct might be to push back, to argue, to defend yourself. Maybe you feel like you need to remind them of everything you've done for them, everything you've sacrificed. You might even feel tempted to say, "You wouldn't be where you are without me." And you know what? You'd be right. But here's the part no one likes to admit. Arguing rarely changes hearts and almost never brings back respect. In fact, the more you fight to be heard, the more power you give away. It's frustrating, no doubt about it. You've lived a full life. You've raised a family. You have wisdom, insight, and experience to share. And yet it feels like your words don't carry the weight they used to, especially in your own home. But that's exactly why how you carry yourself becomes even more important than what you say. I once knew a man named Frank, a retired teacher who spent his entire career commanding respect from his students. In the classroom, his presence alone brought quiet. But at home, things were different. His grown children often interrupted him, rolled their eyes at his opinions, or changed the subject when he shared advice. At first, Frank pushed back. He raised his voice, tried to reason with them, argued to prove that he still mattered. But the more he argued, the worse things became. Then one day, Frank made a quiet decision. He stopped trying to win. Instead of matching their tone, he softened his. He listened more than he spoke. He didn't back down, but he didn't push either. When he did speak, he spoke slowly, thoughtfully, and with calm authority. He started carrying himself the same way he once had in the classroom, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. And something unexpected happened. His children started paying attention again. Slowly, they began to notice his quiet strength. They didn't always agree with him, but they stopped mocking him. They listened more. They asked his opinion. Why? Because they saw that he didn't need their approval to stand tall, and that made them respect him all over again. The truth is, respect isn't something you can argue your way into. It's something you earn back by showing that you already have it, for yourself. When you respond to disrespect with anger, you reinforce the idea that your emotions can be controlled by others. But when you respond with dignity, when you keep your cool, hold your ground, and choose silence over shouting, you remind everyone in the room who you really are. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to beg to be heard. You don't have to explain your life story just to be taken seriously. Let your presence do the talking. Because when you carry yourself with calm confidence, people notice, especially your children. They may not say it out loud, but they will feel it. And in time, they'll follow your lead. Not because you demanded it, but because you quietly inspired it. 3. Withdraw your emotional dependence. One of the hardest lessons we face as we get older is realizing that the emotional bond we have with our children doesn't always feel as strong as it once did. We still love them deeply, that part never changes, but as they grow busy with their own lives, careers, and families, we might find ourselves sitting by the phone, waiting for a call that doesn't come. We might replay old memories, hoping to feel that same closeness again, and slowly, without realizing it, we start tying our happiness to their attention. But here's the truth, and it can be a painful one. When you rely on your children for emotional fulfillment, it changes the dynamic of the relationship, and not for the better. Emotional dependence, even when it comes from love, can feel like pressure. It can make your children feel guilty, overwhelmed, or even annoyed. They may not say it, but they feel it. The unspoken expectation that they are responsible for your happiness. And over time, instead of drawing them closer, that pressure can push them away. I once knew a woman named Helen. She was a devoted mother who gave everything to her children. When they were young, she was their world. But after they grew up and moved out, she found herself feeling lonely. She started calling frequently, reminding them how much she missed them and wished they'd visit. Her intentions were pure, but her children began to pull back. Her phone calls felt like a chore to them, not a joy. Then, something changed. One day, Helen decided to stop waiting by the phone. She stopped chasing their attention. Instead, she joined a local book club, started walking with a neighbor every morning, and took up watercolor painting, something she'd always wanted to try. She made new friends, rediscovered old interests, and began building a life that didn't revolve around her children. And then something remarkable happened. Her children started calling more. They asked about her hobbies, invited her to lunch, and even dropped by just to see how she was doing, not because they felt guilty, but because they missed her. You see, people, even your own children, tend to respect those who have their own identity, who radiate purpose and joy, who are emotionally whole. When you no longer lean on them to fill emotional gaps, they begin to see you differently, not as someone who needs them to feel whole, but as someone who brings value to their lives simply by being who you are. This doesn't mean you love your children any less. It doesn't mean cutting ties or pretending you don't care. It simply means that you don't hand over the keys to your happiness, because your peace, your confidence, and your joy are too important to depend on someone else. So if you've found yourself waiting by the phone, checking your messages, or feeling unappreciated, pause and ask, what would make me feel excited today, even without a phone call? What brings me joy, fulfillment, and connection, just for me? When you invest in yourself emotionally, you send a powerful message to your children. I love you deeply, but I don't need you to feel whole. And that kind of strength, it doesn't push them away, it draws them back with newfound respect. 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. One of the most common reasons children lose respect for their parents isn't because the parents did something wrong, it's because they stopped expecting to be treated with respect. Over time, small things get brushed off. A sarcastic comment here, a dismissive tone there, a decision made without even asking your opinion. You might tell yourself it's not worth making a fuss. You stay quiet to avoid conflict. But what starts as a simple effort to keep the peace slowly chips away at something important: your dignity. Here's a hard but liberating truth. People, even your own children, will treat you the way you allow them to. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that human behavior follows patterns. If they learn they can interrupt you, ignore your boundaries, speak to you disrespectfully, and you'll stay silent, then that behavior becomes normal. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to change. But the good news is, you can change it, and you don't need to yell, fight, or create drama to do it. I once met a man named Robert, a retired businessman who had spent decades running his own company. In his professional life, people respected his time and his word. But at home, it was a different story. His adult children constantly talked over him, dismissed his suggestions, and criticized his decisions. At first, Robert let it slide. He didn't want to seem controlling or old-fashioned. But with every unchallenged remark, the distance between them grew, not just in closeness, but in respect. One day, something shifted. During a family gathering, his son interrupted him mid-sentence. Calmly, Robert said, "I'll continue when you're ready to listen." Everyone paused. It wasn't harsh, but it was firm. A few days later, his daughter mocked one of his opinions. He replied, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect to be treated with respect." These weren't dramatic outbursts. They were quiet, confident responses that let his children know, the way you speak to me matters. At first, they pushed back. They rolled their eyes. They resisted. But Robert stayed consistent. When they crossed the line, he calmly stepped back. If the disrespect continued, he made it clear he wouldn't stay in the conversation or the room. Over time, something powerful happened. They started treating him differently. They listened more. They chose their words more carefully, not out of fear, but out of respect. Setting boundaries isn't about controlling your children or punishing them. It's about protecting your self-worth. It's about saying, "I love you, but I will not allow myself to be spoken to this way." And most importantly, it's about following through when those boundaries are crossed. If you want your children to treat you with respect, ask yourself, what behavior have I been tolerating that actually hurts me? Where do I need to draw the line? Kindly, clearly, and firmly. Remember, you're not asking for anything unreasonable, you're asking for basic respect. The same respect you once taught them to give others. And when you begin standing up for yourself calmly, consistently, and without guilt, they'll begin to stand up a little straighter when they're around you. Not because they have to, because deep down, they know you've earned it. 5. Stop giving without appreciation. As parents, we're wired to give. We give our time, our energy, our help, our resources, sometimes even when we don't have much left to give. For years, it's felt like second nature. You gave because you loved. You gave because it was needed. And truthfully, you didn't expect much in return. But there comes a point when giving starts to feel one-sided, when your time, your support, or even your financial help is met with entitlement rather than gratitude, when your kindness is no longer seen as a generous gesture, but as something expected. That's when giving begins to feel less like love and more like a burden. Here's a truth many parents struggle to accept. When you keep giving to people who don't appreciate it, You don't strengthen the relationship, you weaken it. I once met a man named George. He was the kind of father who never said no. Whether it was money, rides, last-minute babysitting, or help moving apartments, he was always available. His grown children knew they could count on him, but not in the way you'd hope. They didn't thank him, they didn't check in on how he was doing, and when he finally needed something in return, they were too busy. At first, George felt hurt, then confused, then angry, but eventually he realized what had happened. He had taught them that his help came with no limits and no need for appreciation, and they responded accordingly. So George made a quiet change. He stopped offering before being asked. He stopped saying yes out of habit, and when he did give, he made sure it was on his own terms and that his generosity was respected. At first, his children were surprised, even irritated, but in time, they adjusted. They began asking instead of assuming. They said thank you more often. They thought twice before making demands, because now they understood their father's time, energy, and care were valuable, not guaranteed. And this isn't about becoming cold or selfish. It's about honoring yourself. It's about recognizing that your love is not an unlimited resource to be used without care. Giving is beautiful, but only when it's mutual, when it's rooted in appreciation, not expectation. So if you found yourself overextending, giving rides, money, time, or emotional support to children who don't acknowledge it, it may be time to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, am I giving out of love or out of habit? Am I feeling appreciated or simply used? What would happen if I said, not this time, or I need to think about it? You don't have to stop giving altogether, but you can start giving more thoughtfully in a way that protects your energy and reinforces your self-worth. Because when your children realize that your support is a gift, not a guarantee, they'll start treating it and you with more care. Remember, being generous is a strength. Being taken for granted is not. You are allowed to expect appreciation. You are allowed to say no. And most importantly, you are allowed to make your love conditional on respect, not just need. 6. Build a life outside of them. As parents, it's only natural that our lives once revolved around our children. From their first steps to their first heartbreaks, we were there. We scheduled our days around their needs, stayed up late worrying, and found meaning in helping them grow. But what happens when they're grown and no longer need us the way they once did? For many older adults, the answer is painful. We wait, we hope they call, we feel forgotten, and sometimes we unconsciously begin to make them the center of our lives, again, even when they're not asking for that role. But here's the hard truth that often brings freedom. If your children feel like they are your only source of purpose, they may start pulling away, not because they don't love you, but because they feel emotionally responsible for your happiness. People, even your own children, tend to respect those who have their own identity, their own interests, their own joy. When they see you waiting by the phone, checking in constantly, or inserting yourself into their lives out of loneliness, they may start avoiding contact, not out of cruelty, but out of discomfort. I once met a woman named Eleanor. She was a widow in her late 70s, full of warmth and wisdom. After her husband passed, she poured everything into her children's lives. She called daily, gave advice they didn't ask for, and hoped they would fill the emotional space left behind. But instead of drawing them closer, her efforts seemed to push them away. They visited less, their conversations became shorter, and she felt more alone than ever. One day, a friend gently suggested she try something for herself. Just one thing. So she joined a local book club. That led to meeting new people, which led to volunteering at a community center, which led to weekend outings and creative hobbies she had once put aside. Slowly but surely, Eleanor started building a life that had nothing to do with her children and everything to do with her own joy. And then, something beautiful happened. Her children started reaching out more. They were curious about her activities. They admired her independence. They saw her not as someone waiting for attention, but as someone living with purpose. It may seem counterintuitive, but when your world no longer revolves around your children, you often become more magnetic to them. Why? Because people, at every age, are drawn to strength, self-sufficiency, and joy. When you are living fully, you no longer feel like a weight they have to carry. You become someone they want to spend time with, not someone they feel obligated to check on. So ask yourself, when was the last time I did something purely for me? What have I always wanted to try but never had the time for? What kind of life would I live if I stopped waiting and started exploring? You deserve a life filled with curiosity, connection, and growth, not just as a parent, but as a full, vibrant human being. Because the more you embrace your own life, the more your children will respect you. Not out of duty, but out of admiration. Live boldly. Find joy again. And show them that your story isn't over. It's just entering a new, beautiful chapter. By now, you've probably realized that the respect you want from your children doesn't come from raising your voice or reminding them of the past. It comes from something deeper. The way you carry yourself today, the way you speak, set boundaries, and choose to live with purpose, even when others don't seem to notice. You don't need to beg for their attention. You don't need to chase after appreciation. And you certainly don't need to sacrifice your happiness just to keep the peace. Because here's the truth. When you respect yourself, others begin to respect you too, often without a word. Let's be honest, it's not easy. You've spent your life putting others first. You've loved your children more than words can express. But now, this chapter of life is about something more. It's about reclaiming your voice, rebuilding your confidence, and reminding yourself and your family that you're still here, still valuable, and still deserving of love and respect. So if your children have started treating you with less care than you deserve, don't waste your energy trying to fix them. Instead, shift your focus inward. Stop chasing their approval. Start honoring your own needs. Don't argue, lead with calm, steady presence. Let go of emotional dependence and build your own fulfillment. Set boundaries and protect your dignity. Give with intention, not out of obligation. And finally, build a life outside of them, a life that reflects the vibrant person you still are. Because when you live from a place of strength, they'll start seeing you in a different light. Not as someone waiting for their attention, but as someone who quietly commands respect by how they show up in the world. If this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share one thing you're going to do differently from today forward. Your story might just inspire someone else. And if you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another message meant to encourage and empower you. Thank you for spending time with us today. You matter. Your voice matters. And you are worthy of deep, lasting respect. Starting with the way you treat yourself. We'll see you in the next video.